designed to create a emotional response. Well, that very wise lady, Jill Collins, is not here, unfortunately, because she is off on, I don't know what I call it, a vacation. She's off making very important art connections. She's a very, very busy person, and she's off doing very busy people things. I'm a busy sort of guy, too, but I don't get to go places because my busyness exists here. So my busyness exists at the radio station. I fill out paperwork and I do basically everything ever. But that's my job, is to do everything ever. And I like doing everything ever because you get to be good at, there are a lot of people in the radio, all trades and masters of none. And I've made it my personal goal to be a master of at least most of the trades that exist in radio. That would be engineering, just on-air personality, news, programming, and traffic. And there's a whole plethora of things that are involved with in management too. A whole plethora of things that are involved in radio and making radio sound good that I'm not good at yet. And I freely admit that. I'm not an expert at a lot of these things. I would say, because I have the hours in now, I'd say I am an expert at being an on-air personality, and I'm getting there towards being a news person. I am definitely a on-air personality expert. I could go on the air for 2 hours and talk about basically anything. I've gotten to that point, and all of us here are. And I'm really proud of that too. All of us here at the radio station are at that point. We are all capable of going on the air for 2 hours and talking about basically anything with no preparation whatsoever. Keon Rose has had to do that before. In fact, Keon Rose and myself have had to do that before during a weird technical thing that happened on a Thursday. He and I went on and we talked for a good, I think it's about 15 minutes, just completely unscripted, just talking about nothing basically. And it was actually pretty good radio. So we make a good team though, he and I. Actually, any combination of us here at the radio station will make a good team. And I like that. If Jill were here and she and I were doing a show, I think we would make a pretty good team. And I've been on with her before, and I think we make a pretty good team. I've been on the radio with David Tulis, who you were just listening to a few minutes ago here on Hot News Talk Radio, and he and I work really well together. Confederate Mike and I work really well together. Keon Rose and I work excellently together because we have a show together every Thursday. So we're pretty good at that. You can listen to that at 6 o'clock, by the way. And we're working on a new method for downloading our radio shows and uploading them, recording them in a really, really highly compressed way so that they sound good, but they also don't take up a ton of space on your phone, and then uploading those recordings to the internet. And I'm setting up an automated way of making that happen. And it's going to be complicated, but I'm going to make it work. It's just a matter of, making it work. I'm not a programmer by any means. I'm just trying to work out a script in Linux that'll make it work, kind of. We'll figure it out anyway. This is Binary here on Hot News Talk Radio, AM 1240, hotnewstalkradio.com. It would normally be the Art Beat of Chattanooga, but Jill is off doing very important artsy things, and so I don't want to steal her thunder and say that this is the Art Beat of Chattanooga because I'm not really qualified to talk about art. Art is not something that I am very good at. I can't draw to save my life, although I would say it's very good abstract art. I can't draw to save my life. I'm not a very good writer when it comes to things that are, non-news, non-factual, and I'm not particularly amazing at singing either, or playing any instrument for that matter. My talent lies entirely in talking into a microphone in the radio. That's my talent, and art is not part of that sphere, unfortunately. Now, you might say, well, radio is art. Yeah, I would say so, because I feel that it is. And art is such a subjective thing. But I don't want to talk about art too much. I want to get into industrial design because I'm very big into industrial design. I like design of all kinds. Design is something that is very often overlooked, or at least looked at superficially by the average consumer. And I don't like using the word consumer that much because it sounds really barcode. When you say consumer, it sounds like some 1984 or maybe even, Brave New World Huxleyan idea of the consumer. Yes, the American consumer who buys because he must. It just seems kind of, I don't know, man. It seems a little bit barcode. Consumer's not my favorite word ever. I prefer customer because that's a lot more personal. When you say customer, you feel like you're talking about a real human being, right? When you say the word customer, you can picture a guy buying something and being happy about it because he wants to buy that something. When you say the word consumer, you're picturing more a guy who's buying because the marketing demands it or because he is pressured into buying it. So I'm not a big fan of the word consumer. I do like the word customer, though. I like to think that all the businesses we advertise here on Hot News Talk Radio have customers. They don't have consumers. About their business people. They care about their customers. They're not catering to consumers. They're catering to customers, making personal connections with the people who are going to buy from them. And that's very important if you're going to be successful in business. But design is, again, something that I'm very much into. And it's something that's always overlooked by the customer because you're not really supposed to think about design. You're not supposed to think about how well designed your phone is. It's just supposed to kind of work. That's half of the point of it. Think about this. When you start up your phone, you're scrolling around your phone doing things, you're probably not thinking about what a great design the user interface has, unless you're already technically minded. But your average person who buys a smartphone is not thinking, wow, this user interface is really well designed. You usually only notice design when it's really bad already. Design is something that you usually only notice when it's just abhorrent. Because, say, I use a Windows phone and I go, oh, this design is terrible. Why would they do that? And I use Windows 10 sometimes and I say, this design is horrible. Why would they do that? It's hard to find stuff in control panel. It's just obnoxious. One thing that drives me nuts about Windows 10, you can't reassign key bindings, and that just drives me crazy because I've got an IBM Model M keyboard that I use, and I can't bind volume up and down to like Alt F11 or F12 because Windows just doesn't let you do that. Linux will let you do it at the drop of a hat, and Macintosh will let you do it no problem, but Windows, for some reason, you can't do it. It's stupid, but that's Windows for you. It's not exactly designed for uber intelligent individuals. Not that I am one. It's just not designed for people like them or for people like me, average, intelligent, normal people. Well, somewhat normal. I like to think I'm somewhat normal. But design is not something you notice unless it's really, really bad. And something that is going to facilitate and help us come out with better design is 3D printing. Now, 3D printing, I would say, definitely is a form of art, at least when it's done right. You can 3D print an amazing piece of kinetic art. Now, kinetic art is very interesting. Kinetic art is something that you can actually move around yourself. You feel it, you move it. It's gears. Usually there's a lot of gears and things that move around in a very artistic kind of way. And some people, more stuck up people will say, that's not art because it wasn't written in the 1800s. Or that's not art because it's not oil paint on canvas or whatever. It's not a cave painting. It's not art. Well, art evolves just like the human mentality does. Well, actually, human mentality doesn't evolve. Art evolves with technology, put it that way. Art is something that is closely linked to ease of access as well. And 3D printers are becoming more and more easily accessible. And so you're going to see a lot of 3D printed art, 3D printed sculptures that are designed in a computer. If it's designed in a computer in a 3D modeling program and printed out on a 3D printer, is it any less art than something that was sculpted in someone's hands? I would say no, because the design is still there. The idea, the intent is still there. And that's half of art anyway. Yeah, the effort is something that we all admire, but the intent is half of it. What the artist is trying to convey is possibly more important than the effort the artist put into conveying that idea. If I want to present an idea of an apple and I draw an apple, I've succeeded. No matter how bad the drawing is of the apple, I've succeeded at creating that idea. Now, someone may have a better designed or better drawn apple, but the idea is still the same. The effort is there, and that does make that particular piece of art somewhat more better, right? More talented, yeah. But the intent and the idea is still there. It's odd how it all works out. And it's a very controversial subject. You'd be surprised how many people get really angry when you try to talk about what art is and what it means and whatever. For instance, I think, and I'm adamant about this, I really do believe that industrial design can be art. For instance, when I see a radio mast, I see art. That's something that is beautiful to me. And I see a AM tower like we have transmitting to your ears right now, and I see beauty. I see something that is everything in my occupation. That particular piece of metal that's riveted together and it's got radials going out in the ground, that is art to me. And if it is to me, then it is. That's the subjectivity of art. Now, there might be some objective standard for what art is, and we can argue about that. But subjectively, to me, that is art. And someone else trying to tell me that it's not is kind of pointless, because to them it's not, and so to them it's not. But to me it is, so to me it is. Kind of weird how that works out. So I want to get off the art subject because I'm not an artist. I'm not qualified to talk about art, and this is not the Art Beat of Chattanooga with Jill Ann Collins, because she's not here right now. She's in Nashville, but you should listen every Thursday to her show. She's very excellent. She's on at 11 o'clock, and she's off doing business right now, very important things, so she cannot be here, unfortunately, but I'm very glad that she has a show normally every Thursday here on Hot News Talk Radio, AM 1240, and hotnewstalkradio.com as well. 3D printing is something that is everywhere, and you might not even notice it. And one of the places that it exists is somewhere you probably didn't know it was. A 3D printer is actually manufacturing the parts for HP's printers, believe it or not. So half of the custom parts in HP's first 3D printer in over a decade were themselves 3D printed, according to the company's head of 3D printing, Stephen Nigro? I don't know. Nigro. Huh, go figure. The decision was to include the 3D printed parts in 2 new devices, which will start shipping by the end of the year. And it helps the company highlight the quality of the printer's output. But Mr. Nigro, I think, insists that the decision was a purely economic one, according to The Guardian. It's for any given small plastic part, he told The Guardian, that if you're making fewer than 5,500 pieces, or sorry, 55,000 pieces, you're actually better off printing than molding, he says. The reason we're doing it is not because we can, although that certainly would be one reason. It's because we should. It actually makes economic sense for us to print those parts. We can actually save money. Now, 3D printing was not economical 5 years ago. I want to point that out. 3D printing was not even close to economical about 5 years ago, but now it is. Now you can 3D print something even in your own house. There are 3D printers designed for use in your own home. You can buy desktop form factor 3D printers that are actually kind of affordable. It's weird, but you actually can. They really are kind of affordable. And the reason that that is such a big deal is you can now manufacture and prototype objects in the real world in your house. We talk about how annoying it is sometimes that you have to go out and buy things, right? Like, for instance, I want to make I want a phone stand for my particular phone, but no phone stand seems to ever fit my phone. Well, now you can 3D print one, and it works, and it fits, and it's perfect, basically. And there have been projects into 3D printing weaponry as well, and I'm a big fan of weaponry, so I'm all for that. Weaponry is one of my hobbies. I'm not a practitioner, I wouldn't say, but I'm someone who's training in martial arts. It sounds so pretentious when you say that, though. It doesn't it? I train in martial arts. That sounds so pretentious. I take a Shinsei Hapkido class. I'll put it that way. I'm a yellow belt in Shinsei Hapkido. Actually, I'm like this close to being a blue belt. So I'm not amazing at it or anything like that. I'm just average, and it's a good workout, and I enjoy it, and I have friends who are there, and it's good. It's a good time. So I'm into weaponry. I'm into both, physical punching, kicking combat, and I'm into guns, gunpowder, shooting out lead projectiles combat as well. That's something, and knives too. I like knives. I'm into combat of all kinds. Not necessarily because I want to hurt any other people, but because I think it's just an interesting thing to read about, and I think that it's an interesting thing to practice. And it's something that it's physical activity. It gets you outside, and it's one of the only things that will get me outside is shooting guns. That's basically the only thing you can do that will actually get me to go outside is say, hey, you want to shoot some guns? I say, oh, okay, I'll go outside. Why not? That's the only time you'll ever get me to go outside is when there's an offer of explosions, unfortunately for my parents, but whatever. But you can actually now 3D print weaponry. And it's funny because the socialists back in the day were talking about how we got to take manufacturing out of the hands of the elite or whatever. We have to take back the means of manufacturing. Well, you have. It's here now. 3D printing is that. And it's not socialist. It's actually very capitalist because they're selling 3D printers for you to make objects which you can then sell feasibly. You can market the objects which you make. It makes your house, your living room, into a manufacturing facility. Not quite yet, but it can in the next 5 years. You could feasibly right now print out something that you've designed in Maya or 3ds Max or whatever your AutoCAD program is, and you can print that out in your 3D printer, and you can sell that on Etsy, and you can make money doing it. So capitalism has come to the 3D printer market. It's there. It's not socialist at all. It's funny how taking back the means of production is actually very capitalist because it now allows the average person to 3D print items. So I guess that kind of backfired in the face of a lot of socialists, but whatever. That's okay because I don't like socialists anyway. But the interesting thing about this too is that with this, it's now demanded basically that average people can own weaponry. It's now somewhat affordable it's almost comparable in price to 3D print an AR-15 lower compared to buying one. Now, it's not going to be high quality. It's not going to be amazing. It's not going to be anodized aluminum milled from a solid block of metal. It's not. But it will function for a short period of time. The point of it is not that you have a well-functioning firearm right now, I don't think. The point of it is that you have a firearm that you 3D printed. That is the idea behind 3D printing weaponry. It's not necessarily that it works really well. It's that you have it. It can be done, and it spits in the face of everyone who tries to talk about gun control. Because everyone goes, oh, gun control this, oh, gun control that. But if you 3D print a gun, that destroys the whole argument. Oh, we need to stop people from buying guns. Well, okay, we'll make them. You know, you look at, and I'm a fan of studying warfare. I think war is a terrible thing. I really do. I think war is a bad thing. And that seems kind of obvious in the 21st century to say, but that was an unpopular thought in the 20th century, believe it or not. I think war is an unpopular thing, and I think war is not good for the populace. So it's double unpopular. It's anti-popular. I think war is bad. That having been said, I'm a fan of studying warfare. I'm a fan of studying war. I think it's always really interesting to see how wars are fought. Not to say that I like it or that it's a good thing, but it's interesting to study anyway. You know, it's like people study atrocities that happened during the age of Nazi Germany. It doesn't mean they're big fans of Hitler. It means they like studying it. It's interesting. The same sort of thing with me in warfare in general. And one thing that I've noticed is seemingly no matter what, if there's some sort of guerrilla insurrection, they're always going to come up with weaponry. You know, whether it's supplied from a foreign entity or they just make the dang things themselves, you're going to come up with weaponry. And 3D printing is an interesting example of that. With 3D printing, you now have weaponry in your house. You know, the whole argument of, oh, we got to take guns away from people who shouldn't have them. You know, well, who gets to determine who shouldn't have them in the first place? Because, you know, where does that mentality come from? Where does this argument come from that this guy shouldn't have guns, but this guy should, or this guy is on an arbitrary list that is not governed by any sort of peer review or any sort of court system, and he shouldn't have a gun because someone arbitrarily put him on a list. You know, I might be on a no-fly list. I don't know. But I've never committed a crime. Well, I've never been convicted of a crime. Let's clarify. I've never been convicted of a crime. And yet, for some reason, I might be put on some list at some point. Not to say that I should be or that I would be, but I could be on a list at some point, which would restrict me from buying firearms, even though I have no intent to ever harm anyone with a firearm unless they threaten my house, my family, my property. That's the only time anyone should use weaponry is defense, right? You know, offensive war is not a good thing. Offensive combat is not a good thing, but defensive combat is honorable and it is lawful and it is ethical as well. You know, there is nothing prohibited about ethical defensive combat. So that's why owning a firearm is a good thing. And that's why 3D printing them is the ultimate slap to the face to those who want to say, oh, well, you shouldn't own a gun because only police should have them or only the military should have them because they're the ones who are trained enough to own it. 3D printing is totally changing that whole dialogue. And lawmakers are scared of it to the point where there have been bills in different states that would ban 3D printed guns. Now, I'm not sure how they're going to enforce that ban because I could very easily 3D print an AR-15 lower in my house if I bought a MakerBot, and there's really nothing that could be done about it by any lawmaker if they never found out. I could stockpile hundreds of them, and under ATF standards, they are firearms, although by themselves they don't shoot any bullets. I could manufacture a bunch of them, hide them away under my house, and the police, the military, the government, the legislature, the courts, no one would ever know about it, and yet it would be, you know, some ATF giant felony. BATFE, I should say. That's the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives. Those are all of my favorite things, by the way. I'm a fan of alcohol, not to the point of excess, but I think drinking a beer once in a while is a good thing to do. It's actually healthy. I do like tobacco once in a while, and I think, again, that's healthy in moderation. I'm not a chain smoker or anything, but a good cigar and a good pipe once in a while is a good thing to do. It's good for you. Believe it or not, it actually is somewhat good for you. There are health benefits. And firearms, of course, you know I'm a fan of. And explosives, I mean, hey, if you're not hurting anybody, you're not damaging anyone's property or eardrums, and you're blowing stuff up, I don't really care. I don't think anyone else should care either what you do in your spare time, to be quite frank with you. What happened to America where we got into this culture where we think that it's everyone's business what everyone else does? You know, if you don't see it, you don't hear it, you're not aware of it, what do you care, man? You know, if it's not affecting anyone else or it's not prohibited in God's law, whichever religion you happen to believe in. Who cares, right? Honestly, who cares? If it's not abhorrent, if it's not against the 10 Commandments, it's not against the Constitution, who cares what people do in their houses? When did America become full of just a bunch of uppities who want to get their noses up everybody's butt? What happened, man? I don't know. This is Binary here on Hot News Talk Radio, AM 1240, hotnewstalkradio.com. We're going to talk a little bit more about 3D printers and the space race, the new commercial space race, where now Boeing is saying it's gonna one up SpaceX. Wow.
I'm blowing everything up. We're starting over. I'm doing a new show. I want guys who push it to the middle of the table and go over the top. Take a risk, fail miserably. I'm right, and I'm not wrong, and I'll never back down. Conflict works. Allow it.
It's The Herd with Colin Cowherd. Right here and everywhere. Noon Eastern.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds. We'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.
Explore the world, or maybe just the Caribbean, from the sunny deck of a cruise ship. You're cooled by iced drinks and dozing off amid quiet chit-chat by the pool. Today, come and make it happen. Get free Expedia Cruise Ship Center dining credits in the veranda levels or higher, on top of other extras. Expedia Cruise Ship Centers, today only. At Overlook at Hamilton Place at 2260 Gun Barrel. Expedia, that's it, 6 p.m. today. Win a door prize, maybe an extra perk. Expedia today at 6.
Listen up, y'all. Ben Phillips, Home Rate Mortgage, 805-9100. I'm in the business of saving people money. And if you want to save money, pick that cell phone up right now. 805-9100. I received a call that I won't forget. The guy is a Chattanooga police officer who served our great country in the Air Force. A true American hero. Our hero is renting, which costs too much for a space too small. We helped him achieve the American dream. And the best part is this. He purchased a $180,000 home with zero down. His payment is $200 less than what his rent was. And now he has a safe place with more space to raise his family. It's easy, and you can do it too. It just takes 10 minutes and one phone call. 805-9100.
Turn a house into a home.
Whole body vibration really works for weight loss, pain relief, circulation, and building bone density. Go to Lily's as seen on TV and talk to Dottie at the Gun Barrel Road store and Robert at the 153 Hickson location. 10 minutes equals 1 hour walking. It really works.
Cash, 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 and more cash. Rick Davis has the cash. Rick Davis will give you top dollar for your gold, silver, diamonds, and coins. You'll get international prices. It's like he's giving away money. And top dollar for your gold, silver, diamonds, and coins. There he goes. More cash out the door from Rick. Rick Davis will give you top dollar. Top dollar for your gold, silver, diamonds, and coins. Cash, 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 and more cash. Rick Davis has the cash and diamonds. Rick Davis will give you top dollar for your gold, silver, diamonds, and coins. 5301 Brainerd Road. You know where it is. Cash, 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 and more cash.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds. We'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.
Hot 1240, Hot News Talk Radio with your Hot News Now update. A woman was gunned down in cold blood on 7th Avenue, left to die in the street. She was taken in a personal vehicle to the hospital where she expired. Police are still trying to track down a suspect. The victim has not yet been identified. A woman on East 28th Street said she was unloading her kid from her car when a young man walked up with a gun, demanded her cash. When she handed it over, he sped off in a black Impala. Police eventually tracked him down in a church parking lot and arrested him, where he admitted to his involvement in that crime and also running away from police. He's an 18-year-old young man. $750,000 of federal cash are going to be granting the Hamilton County Sheriff's Office the ability to issue 6 new SROs, school resource officers, to different Hamilton County schools around the area. The sheriff says the SROs are not just there to act as policemen, but also as mentors and leaders in the school. If it's going on in the Tennessee Valley, it's going on Hot 1240 Hot News Talk Radio. Like us on Facebook and get us on the TuneIn Radio app on your smartphone.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds. We'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.
We expect lots of sunshine, dry and warm weather out there once again through your afternoon. Highs into the mid-80s. Tonight, clear, lows back into the upper 50s. A little patchy late fog possible for Thursday and Friday. Continued warm and dry. Highs back into the 80s. A little cooler for the weekend, but still dry through Sunday. Glass Farm Nursery is now open. The largest pansy supplier around, with flats only $14.99 and a huge selection of first quality 8-inch mums only $4.99. Glass Farm Highway 11, 4 miles south of Trenton. And I'm Source Gene 12, Chief Meteorologist Patrick Moore.
On AM 1240, Hot News Talk Radio.
Blue Origin, the company that's famously headed by Jeff Bezos, the CEO of Amazon.com, had a successful flight. Now, Blue Origin is the competitor to SpaceX, and SpaceX is, well, kind of the competitor actually to Boeing. Boeing is a company which has been working with the American government with space travel for years and years and years and years and years. I mean, forever. The space shuttle was Boeing. Lockheed does a lot of work with the government as well, but Boeing does the bulk of it. A lot of the F-Series fighters are Boeing as well, although some are Lockheed, but a lot of them are Boeing. So the Boeing 777 you may have flown on in the 90s is built by the same people who build spacecraft and machines which kill people in the Middle East. Kind of weird, isn't it? Weird how government contracts work out like that. But such is the modern age. Well, private space firm, according to Extreme Tech, Blue Origin, doesn't get as much attention as SpaceX. It really doesn't. With all of its missions to the International Space Station and plans for Mars colonizations, but still, Blue Origin is doing some fascinating things. Just yesterday at its Texas launch facility, it successfully launched, or rather tested the launch abort system on its new Shepard rocket. I can't imagine that the Shepard rocket is actually named after Commander Shepard from Mass Effect, but I really want it to be, so I'm just going to assume that in my head. Although success doesn't quite get the point across, the launch was actually absolutely flawless. Now, we know SpaceX has been having a few problems here recently. And I know you're probably thinking, oh, SpaceX is done. It's over. Look, Elon Musk is going to have to pull the plug on SpaceX. No, probably not. SpaceX is getting enough attention from various people that it's probably actually going to work out okay. The reusable rocket concept does need to be used. I think it does need to be perfected, and it is a good idea. Now, I'm not an aerospace engineer, and I actually don't know that much about physics either. In fact, I barely know anything about pre-algebra, to be quite honest with you. But I do know that the reusable rocket concept is something that is backed by a lot of very rich people who actually, honestly, also have a lot of money invested in SpaceX, so maybe there's something to do with that. But it's a pretty well-respected system. Now, Blue Origin, again, for its credit, is working on a competitive system, and that's good. That's good. We have competition in private space travel. That's good. Finally, competition in private space travel. Well, we've had it for a while now, actually, probably since the beginning, but still, it's a good thing. It's a good idea. We need competition in business. Competition in business is what makes business people drive harder. It's what makes them good. That's why radio is so good. Think about it. When you listen to most radio stations in this market, they're all pretty good. You know, and I'm not going to lie. I've got nothing against the people who work at any other radio station because we're all in the same business here, you know. But I want to tell you something. We're the best. But also, the other guys are pretty dang good. But the reason for that is fierce competition in radio. Competition is ridiculous. I mean, it's crazy, man. You don't know competition unless you worked in radio or some other cutthroat business, television maybe. The competition is crazy here, especially with sales. I mean, man, they will take you down. You got to be careful in this business. You got to be careful. You might get shot. I can tell you crazy stories that I've heard from other people about how crazy radio is. You know, right now I haven't experienced many crazy things because I'm not on the front lines of the sales team. I'm more on the front lines of the news team, you know, being news director and everything. But it's still a pretty crazy business, and the competition is definitely fierce. That's why the production has to be excellent, which I do a lot of, and I think I'm pretty good at it. And that's why the programming especially has to be excellent. And the guy who does the programming does a wonderful job of the programming. Basically, everything has to be spot on perfect, or people will notice. They'll notice immediately. If you're off by a millisecond, people will notice. It's a cutthroat business. So space travel should be the same way. It should be a cutthroat, high-stakes, high-risk business. And it is, fortunately, because you have companies like Blue Origin and Boeing and SpaceX all duking it out, and Virgin Galactic, don't forget, all duking it out for contracts, duking it out for having the recognition, because that's almost as important as having a good contract is recognition. If you don't have the recognition, you ain't nothing, man. You got to have that recognition. You know, you can have a good company, but if nobody knows who you are, you might as well not have a company anyway. So what was different about yesterday's launch, according to Extreme Tech, is the addition of a mock crew capsule atop of the New Shepard, the rocket. About 40 seconds into the mission, the rocket was programmed to simulate an anomaly which would put the crew at risk or in danger. That triggered the abort system on the crew capsule to blast it clear of the booster. And you can see a whole launch video online. It's very interesting stuff. The crew capsule is equipped with a solid rocket booster packing 70,000 pounds of thrust. Unlike a liquid fuel engine, a solid rocket booster burns through all of its fuel at a constant rate when ignited. You can't throttle it. That means the booster in this launch is also subjected to incredible force when the abort system was activated. It was entirely possible the booster would be destroyed in the process. Blue Origin was careful to stress that it didn't necessarily expect the New Shepard to survive this test, but it did. Not only did it survive, it continued into space and came back down for a perfect vertical landing, which is its 5th VTOL. Really good. VTOL standing for vertical takeoff and landing, which these rockets are actually capable of. So doing the same thing SpaceX is doing, but possibly even better. Blue Origin has some very cool systems, but it's still a few years behind the likes of SpaceX. The current New Shepard just goes straight up and back down. It doesn't have enough power to get a payload into orbit and then return back to Earth for a landing. But this was the last launch for the current New Shepard. A next generation version of this rocket is now being manufactured, so maybe it'll have more advanced capabilities sometime in the future. And that certainly is a possibility. This means, again, fierce competition in the space market. SpaceX is going to have to watch after Blue Origin. And that's a good thing. Like I say, that's a very good thing. That's why computers are as good as they are, because of fierce competition. You had the likes of Texas Instruments going against Intel back in the 70s and 80s, mostly the 70s, battling for the first integrated circuit chip, the IC, back in the day. And that's really what drove the computer market into the home, was these two companies battling it out to sell the integrated circuit. And it worked for Intel, who used to work for Robert Noyce, used to work for Fairchild, and he formed Intel back way back when. Intel stands for Integrated Electronics, by the way, in case you didn't know. It actually doesn't stand for intelligence. It stands for Integrated Electronics, or Intel. Kind of interesting. A lot of people don't actually know that, but Intel does stand for Integrated Electronics. And TI is, well, Texas Instruments. That's kind of obvious, actually, seeing as they're in Texas and they're one of the larger tech companies, or were one of the larger tech companies in the world at the time. You know, TI used to rival even IBM back in the day. Isn't that weird? You know, Texas Instruments was one of the bigger computer companies in the market back in the 70s and 80s. And now we think of TI, we just think of calculators. That's sort of the niche market that TI has gotten itself into. And they do a lot more. You know, don't get me wrong, they do a lot of stuff, but it's still kind of interesting. I'm looking at what's happening with Hurricane Matthew right now, by the way. I want to give you a bit of an update on Hurricane Matthew, which is barreling along towards Florida as we speak. Southern Florida is going to be affected, I'm afraid, by Hurricane Matthew coming up here soon. And what this could mean is very bad flooding, both inland and on the sea, at the coast, I suppose, for major areas of Florida, including including Dayton Beach. And that could be a very bad thing for everyone living there. And I've heard that even Georgia, the coast of Georgia, could be severely affected by this hurricane as well. So people who are living on the coast in Savannah particularly need to watch out, because this hurricane is going to be causing massive, major, serious, lethal problems for people living on the south of Florida up to the Georgia coast, even into Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. So we'll be watching after that and praying for the people who are going to be affected by it. And certainly not something that you want to end up in the middle of, a hurricane. And this is, I think, the first major one we've had in almost a decade. The last one that Sandy was big, but it wasn't as big as this one, believe it or not. Sandy was catastrophic, but Sandy was not as big as Matthew. The last really big hurricane we had, I believe, was Katrina back in 2005. So it shows you how long it's been. You know, Bush was still president back when we had the last Category 5 hurricane, as far as I know. Kind of weird to think about. Well, the Boeing CEO says that he will explore Mars before SpaceX does. On Tuesday, a week after Elon Musk's big Mars reveal in Guadalajara, Mexico, Boeing chief executive and chairman Dennis Muilenburg was asked what big innovations the company had planned for its second century of operations. After ticking off a list of flight and aerospace innovations, Muhlenberg came to deep space exploration, saying, first person on Mars. I'm convinced the first person to step foot on Mars will arrive there riding on a Boeing rocket, Muhlenberg confidently said during a Boeing-sponsored tech summit in Chicago called What's Next? This is according to Ars Technica. It doesn't manifest itself publicly all that often, but there is an intense rivalry between both Boeing and SpaceX, which has come along the last decade and threatened the larger company's space business by offering discounted space flight. SpaceX, you might say, is kind of like the Walmart of space travel. You know, you have the Publix, which is Boeing, and you got the Walmart, which is SpaceX. And Publix does a lot of good stuff, but Walmart is cheaper. So it's kind of hard to pick sometimes, depending on who you're asking. Well, the closest thing to trash talking in 2014 came when John Elbone, the head of Boeing's space division, compared the two companies by saying, we go for substance, not for pizzazz. And they haven't really said anything about each other since then, until now. Boeing, of course, won't be sending anyone to Mars without collecting tens of billions of dollars in federal contracts for its Space Launch System rocket, which it is NASA's prime contractor. And Ars analysis found that NASA will spend about $60 billion developing and flying the SLS rocket before there's even the possibility of landing 4 to 6 humans on Mars in the late 2030s. And that does not include the expensive spacecraft, deep space habitats, and accommodations on the surface of Mars. And the other question is, will landing on Mars be a one-way trip? You know, the Mars One mission seems to think that it will be, that landing on Mars is a one-way trip. They'll land there and they will die there. They'll build a habitat, yes, but they will most likely die there. And that's a frightening thing to think about. It's not something that you want to happen to anybody, but it's something that very well could happen if Mars One does go through with its project. And of course, they all know the risk, hopefully, of launching into Mars, or launching onto Mars, I suppose, and living there, having a habitat there. But it's still kind of I don't know. It's weird to think about people blasting off into space and never coming back. I don't know. I don't like that idea. I don't think that's ever happened so far. There's not been any space fatalities as far as I know, aside from Columbia, which is technically in near space, re-entering the atmosphere. But that's a whole nother topic, and that's not really a space fatality. It's a near space in atmosphere fatality, but whatever. There's a lot going on in tech news. You may have heard all the announcements Google has made, but there's something big happening that is only being sort of looked at very slightly in media right now, and that is the NSA contractor who was just recently arrested and charged with stealing state secrets. Yeah, from the NSA. Now, had Edward Snowden been caught by authorities, he probably would have been charged similarly with stealing state secrets, and possibly even with treason, depending on who was the prosecutor in this particular case. But a government contractor with top secret clearance was arrested in late August and then criminally charged with unauthorized removal and retention of classified materials by a government employee or a contractor, according to the DOJ. New York Times says that the worker was a Booz Allen Hamilton contractor working on behalf of the National Security Agency. Now, why the NSA keeps contracting out to these companies, I don't know. Money reasons. But really, why does the NSA keep contracting out to these big companies and then being all surprised and shocked when information leaks out or almost leaks out or someone steals information? It seems like you should expect it at this point. You know, it seems like that should be something we all are used to now, because it should happen more often, quite frankly. You know, contractors are not always known for their, well, shall we say, loyalty, especially government contractors. I mean, look at private military contractors. Those guys make a mess of things pretty often, and we're just kind of used to it. I'm sure there's a Department of Defense budget that's specifically there to handle screw-ups by private security contractors. So why then are we surprised when intelligence contractors mess up like this too? I don't know. Well, one writer for the New York Times says, I can't think of any prosecutions that have had at least the speculation of the large-scale insider threat the New York Times appears to be saying, says Susan Hennessy, managing editor of Lawfare and former attorney at the Office of the General Counsel at the NSA. That's what she says to Ars Technica. A Wednesday press release was issued by the U.S. attorney in Maryland, who says that Harold Thomas Martin III was arrested on the 27th of August and was charged a few days later, actually 2 days later. The criminal complaint was unsealed on Wednesday, yesterday, and it's not clear yet what exactly he's alleged to have taken. And they probably can't even say what he's alleged to have taken. I think about the top secret nature of what was released by Edward Snowden and what benefit that gave us as people, as citizens of the U.S. and of the world, and think about what could potentially be coming after that. This guy might have wanted to be the next Edward Snowden, but he was stopped before it could happen. A statement which was provided by Martin's unnamed lawyers to the New York Times says, "We have not seen any evidence, but what we do know is that Hal Martin loves his family and his country. There's no evidence that he intended to betray his country." Prosecutors note the press release that search warrants were executed at his home, car, and 2 storage sheds. Investigators located hard copy documents and digital info stored on various devices and removable digital media. By removable digital media, by the way, that could mean USB flash drives, or it could mean MMC memory cards, SD cards, or even CD-ROMs or DVD-ROMs, or any media storage device. It could even be a phone, potentially. A large